Cambridgeshire, this is Salam Radio.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and that means peace be upon you. Welcome to a brand new show here on Salam Radio 106.2. You can tell I'm super excited because I'm actually dressed up for this show. I didn't dress up for this show, but I am dressed up for this show, and I'm really, really excited because this is a brand new show on Salam Radio called Why Politics Matters. And you might think that's a short show of about a minute where you tell me that it doesn't. Hopefully, I'm here to change your mind, and I'm here ably supported by Alex Blower. Alex, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, great to be in the studio with you. Great to be on this show with you. You know me. You know a little bit about my background. I'm very, very tuned into the political sphere, and you're massively into politics. Why do you think this show is important?
Well, I feel really at the minute, and you're quite right, politics is so important. It's something that touches almost every aspect of our life.
Well, we're going to be asking people, isn't it? Well, what does politics mean to you? And it'd be interesting to see what people say.
And I think we're going to get a wide range of answers, and I think for everybody it probably means something a little bit different.
Yeah.
For me, it's so important.
Yeah.
Because it's what decides on how all of us are going to live together. And currently we seem to be going through an area of, or a period of real disenfranchisement. I mean, if we have a look at the actual voter turnout for our local area, during the last local by-elections, we're talking figures at around the 30% mark.
So we're going to be talking about what this even means, because we're talking voter turnout. A lot of our listeners, they might not know what that means. But essentially what you're saying is, out of every 100 voters, only 25, 30, 35 people bother to actually vote. Yeah. And it's because why do you think that might be?
I think a lot of them don't see that there's anything out there that represents them.
Yeah.
And they're quite right. A lot of us do not feel that we have a political home right now, that there's anybody out there that's actually representing particularly the lower economic demographics, the vulnerable, and the working classes, which is exactly more of the reason though why we need people going out and voting, to hold them to account. I mean, if you've got a Tory government that only has people, or 30% of the population turning out to vote, they only have to keep 20% there or thereabouts happy and to be remaining in power and not have to change anything, to be able to get away with absolutely anything they want to be getting away with. And if we have a look at the political landscape over the course of the last couple of months, or the couple of years rather, they're certainly seeming to get away with a lot more now that is unprecedented and they never would have been getting away with in the past.
So that's just going to pull you back on that. So that we're basically talking about people's engagement with politics.
But and that democratic process.
Yeah, but what's your history? Why are you on this show? What is your back? Give me your background. When was the first time you took an interest in politics?
As a youth, I'll be right. So I used to engage, and then I turned off. And the switch that got turned off for me was the Iraq War. It was seeing the UK hold the largest on the streets demonstration has ever been seen in Europe.
This is, are we talking
2002?
2001, 2, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Post 9/11.
Correct.
Yeah.
Just after, correct, yeah. And 2 million people on the streets in the UK. All of Europe had never seen anything like that. And it didn't change anything. Still, we had British warplanes going in and civilians, women, children being killed at the hands of them. And I think that really was...
us. At the hands of us.
At the hands of us. And absolutely, and that's it.
Because you have to own it, right?
We're not separate from the actions of our nation. No people are. If you're going to say you're British, then you're going to be British warts and all. Yeah. Those dead children are at the hands of British policy. Yeah. And we have to own that. And that's certainly what happened against, I believe, the will of the democratic process on 2002 and going into war. And when I say democratic process, I really do mean that mass action, protesting on the streets, is part of that process.
So, Iraq War, before that, would you say you were engaged? You were involved in politics at all? Were you interested?
Yeah, but only fringely. I mean, I'm a 45-year-old man now. 2002, you're talking, I was 25. I was still enjoying going out.
Yeah.
I was still more interested in myself, I suppose, at those days. We're all a little bit more narcissistic, aren't we, I suppose, as younger men than what we are as we grow old. But that really was, I suppose, something that for me signed myself going into that box and thinking to myself, what's actually the point of being involved in this or even worrying about it? Not only is it so far away, but I cannot have an impact. My voice doesn't matter, and apparently neither does that of my fellow citizens.
And this is exactly why we want to do the show. We want people to tell us what it is about politics that irks them, what makes them feel disenfranchised, or why they love it, why they're so involved in it, or where do they sit on the spectrum. And we are welcoming callers. Absolutely. If you guys are listening to the show, you've got any view on politics, positive or negative, feel free to call in. The studio number is 01733 602 133. That's 01733 602 133. Call in, let us know, what does politics mean to you? What do you think it is? What do you think it encapsulates? And why are you put off by it, or why are you so attracted to it, or why are you so indifferent to it? I'd love to know. So just going back to you then, Iraq War made you feel disenfranchised, 2 million people on the street, made no difference whatsoever. And we were talking about this one week because we were at a demonstration yesterday.
We were.
And how many people were there estimated?
Approximately 25,000, I believe, the figures currently, yeah.
So in my eyes, and that's, I'm almost embarrassed to say, that's the first London national demonstration I've been to. In my eyes, there was a lot of people. In my eyes, the streets were lined, placards, banners, chants,
red flags
noise,
flying high,
lots and lots of red flags. But I felt like that was a massive, massive demonstration. But you're saying that was 25,000 compared to what, 2 million?
2 million
for the Iraq War. Yeah. Nothing happened off the back of the Iraq War demonstrations. What's 25,000 people going to do? I mean, what is it that people need to do to be heard outside of going to the ballot box and voting?
Great question. And the simple answer is building the momentum on these kind of movements.
Yeah.
Yesterday wasn't so much a protest or a demonstration that was seeking to change something on that day. Yesterday was a show of strength of the working classes. It was a coming together of unions from all sides of industry, whether it was nurses' unions, teachers' unions, the communication network, Unite, or the RMT, all together with one purpose. A show of strength on a day when there was going to be rail strikes, on when people had to rely on coach transport to get into London, and still be able to take these mass squares, to still be able to rock up on Downing Street.
Trafalgar Square was covered, wasn't it?
We owned the city for the day. It certainly felt like that going through it. I mean, obviously we were in a little bit of a bubble on our marching route, and I'm sure there was a lot of parts of London that wouldn't even have been aware that we were there and we were doing what we were doing. But walking through there, it certainly had a magical feeling. It
really did.
The capitalists, the parasites, as I would refer to them, on London every single day of the year almost.
You've given us a bit of a clue as to where your politics lies just from that last sentence. So I'm going to call you up on that.
Okay.
I'm going to call you up on that. So post-Iraq War, you were disenfranchised. What made you get back into it? Have you been associated with a political party in the past, or are you an independent? Are you an activist? How would you describe yourself?
Right. After 2002, I'd say that I just concentrated on myself. I ended up working in sales. I was a national account manager for a small company with an exceptionally high revenue turnover.
Wow, okay.
Which meant that my take-home was exceedingly well. I was probably living the most comfortable as I ever had been in my life, and I had a nervous breakdown.
Even though everything was going hunky-dory, super smooth?
Whilst I was jumping through every single hoop and ticking every single box that I am told to by the current residing narratives about society.
Well, it's just the media, isn't it? The media saying, get yourself a good job, earn a living, drive a nice car, and you're laughing.
Live in a nice house, have a nice garden, you know, absolutely, yeah. I'm a single parent, and I was only seeing my son at weekends during this period, and I think that probably had some factor to it. But what it did do is having that breakdown, it made me question absolutely everything that I was doing. And the way out of it that I found was being honest with myself about how I felt about what I was doing, the world around it. And I took a great strength from reading some documents on Marxism, on collective decision making.
Isn't that a dirty word?
I've been told by many it isn't. The funny thing is that whenever I ask anybody who does have a negative connotation of Marxism, and I ask them, what part of Marxist teachings is it that you find is so disgusting, I'm yet to have anybody be able to have an answer. It seems to me that it is an opinion solely held by those who have not investigated or studied any of his teachings themselves.
So you got into that. when you were
And
about
from
to have a
that,
nervous breakdown.
After, I mean,
After,
I
okay.
had
So that was
proper
almost recovering
falling
from it.
and that's where I got my strength from. I felt that I was actually finally finding something that had some foundations on meaning,
Okay.
based in society rather than just individualist narcissistic tendencies,
Yeah.
which is what capitalism teaches us to do.
So I'm gonna throw something out there, and I'd love to get your views on it, because I know you're not a religious person.
No, I'm not. No,
But we've talked about religion in the past, and I'm a Muslim.
Yeah.
And I feel like if I lose complete faith in, say, the democratic process or politics or whatever, I've still got my faith.
Sure.
So I've got my set of standards, values, the way I live my life.
A belief system.
A belief system, yeah. And it
Yeah.
almost sounds like you found a belief system that you could operate within.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
it was.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what Marxism allowed me to do was, as a child, I would always be told to stop being so emotional.
Okay.
For example, and I am an emotional guy. I'm still an emotional person now. If I see somebody suffering, I feel their pain.
Okay.
If I hear about deaths, it doesn't matter how many thousands of miles they are, but if it's subjugated people that have died at the hands of oppression, then I feel that unjust under my skin, and it angers me. And what Marxism does was it allowed me to be that way. It taught me that is actually normal. That is humanity. Which is totally against what I feel society teaches us today.
I'm just going to pause you there, because we've had our very first comment on this show. And I'm going to read it out, and I'm going to give it.
Somebody out there listening.
There is definitely somebody out there listening, but I want to give it the limelight that it deserves, because this is the very first of, I hope, many, many comments from our listeners. And this is from a lovely lady named Elizabeth Bartley, who says, I went to the Iraq war demo. The police diverted us so that we arrived Hyde Park ages after the majority had left, so you couldn't see the actual numbers. It broke my heart that it made no difference. Until Jeremy Corbyn came into the scene, I was totally disillusioned, but he gave me hope. What happened to him was appalling, and I'm not sure what the way forward is, but I know we have to fight for what is right. Now,
Absolutely.
Okay,
And-
firstly, Liz, thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Liz, and thank you for texting in on our first show.
Yeah, absolutely buzzing about that.
Yeah.
But look, Liz, you mentioned a number of things, and I think we'll pick these apart. Maybe not all on this show, but certainly over the coming weeks, because we will be talking about Jeremy Corbyn's introduction to politics and what that did, what that's done to the
Absolutely.
Labour Party. We'll be talking about where the current Labour Party is.
Well, I'll just comment on something there myself,
Go
because
for
it does blend in quite nicely into the story or the little
Go
insights
for
of
it.
myself that you were telling, and that is, yeah, sure. After my nervous breakdown about 2016, I'd started finding these perspectives, but I still thought I was on my own with them. And when I had a look out to the mainstream media and social media at these times,
They made you believe you were alone.
absolutely.
Yeah,
In
yeah.
fact, it almost
Brilliant.
kind of made me feel that there was something wrong with me for reading it in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah.
Now, it was kind of quite exciting as well at the same
Yeah,
time.
what's wrong with me for caring about people? Yeah,
Exactly, yeah. But then when Corbyn came on the scene, and whatever you think of the guy, he's not the Messiah. He's just another
Not a very naughty
politician.
boy,
Yeah. But what he did do for a lot of people, I believe, that had these same feelings as myself, was make us realise for possibly the first time in some of our lives, and for many other people for the first time in a very long time, that they weren't alone in having empathy, sympathy, and a want for a better world.
It's spot on, isn't it? It's absolutely spot on. Like, can you imagine any current politician going on live on air and saying, what I want is a country where we look after people?
In,
Right, and
in the
that's-
current landscape, it's bizarre
It's
almost,
just
isn't
absolutely,
it?
it's almost an alien language
Yeah.
that he was speaking. But he went to Glastonbury, and he's speaking to people who are out there rocking. They're enjoying themselves, having a really good time. Had a concert listening, and then the biggest roar and the biggest crowd was for a 68-year-old politician who who's got no rhythm, and he's talking about and everyone's like, oh. So I mean, we will come back to that again, but it's really good that you picked that up, that point about how you felt like you were the weirdo for feeling what you did, and yet there were people out there that made you connect to that. And there's a lot of people out there who maybe don't have the voice of the mainstream that do feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. There must be. And I suppose that's why social media has been a brilliant tool over the past sort of like 5 or 6 years, and what's been allowing these other movements to build and people to connect and find people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Liz has just followed up and said, mentioned the march from yesterday, saying there was no mention of it on the BBC. And
No.
this is the thing, that's what really gets me. It's like you've got 25,000 people from around the country who've taken a full day out of their lives,
Yep.
taken time away from their children, grandchildren, from their jobs, from their responsibilities, paid money to get onto a coach, suffered the rain, because it was wet
Wasn't
and
a
the
great
cold,
day weather-wise, no.
and still came together in solidarity. How is that not? How is that? You know, you have 3 people involved in a fight outside a train station,
Yeah.
and it makes, you know, especially if it's in a poorer neighborhood or a black neighborhood, it will be on the BBC.
Sure.
25,000 people go out of their way, spend a whole day doing what they're doing, and it's not mentioned on the BBC. And that just goes back to what you're saying about how the media makes you feel like you're all alone.
Absolutely, it does, and it raises another question as well. And when we think back at this, I don't know if you realised, but around 3:30 during yesterday's speeches, another demonstration had started, and it's certainly one that I'm sure that we can all feel close to our hearts and some sympathy with. It was about the liberation of people being subjugated in Iran, particularly the women now.
That was really interesting how that joined with the People's
I don't
Assembly.
think the establishment wanted that. Now, obviously, being in part of the People's Assembly National Organising Group, I feel I would know if People's Assembly were aware of another demonstration happening at the same place.
Sure.
And there was no conversation around it. In fact, we had some of our biggest speakers coming onto the stage scheduled around that time.
Yeah.
Now, thankfully, we'd arrived there 10-15 minutes earlier. Speakers started coming on, and I think approximately 5 minutes after Jeremy Corbyn had finished, the other demonstration started behind us.
Yeah.
Now, that kind of reflects a little bit to what Liz texted in with saying about during the Iraq one, about how the police had split them up,
Absolutely,
dilute the message.
Diluted the message, yeah.
And isn't that exactly what would happen is if you had 2 demonstrations happening at the same place?
So I mean, I'm gonna play devil's advocate a little bit and say 2 million people is a lot of people to manage, and the police maybe wanted to cordon them off in certain ways so as to minimize the impact or the chances of confrontation and fights and, you know,
Sure.
disorder. So I'm just playing devil's advocate,
Yeah.
but I absolutely buy what you're saying in that there might have been a motive there to dilute the message, the impact, and also almost, for example, yesterday, deliberately have a demonstration upsetting another demonstration,
Sure.
flares, kickoffs, all of a sudden it's a violent protest, riot police come out and we get trampled by horses.
Yeah, and there will be people out there that doubt my perspective of it being done on purpose, I'm quite sure. And I'm not trying to say that everything is quite conspiratory. However, there is another important factor here, and that is that protest has been a fundamental part of British democratic process forever. Were it not for direct action and people coming together on the streets, the working classes would not even have the vote. If it wasn't for people...
we're gonna explore this in detail, aren't we? Like the history of politics,
and
the history of
how we
voting,
got
and
to
how we
where
got
we
it.
are.
And I think some of the most interesting stuff we're going to talk about is that, because we're going to be talking about, you know, the peasants' revolt. We're going to be talking about the suffragettes.
Yeah.
We're going to be talking about all those things in coming weeks. But sorry, go on, carry on.
And you're quite right. We will look into this in a lot more detail as we go on. But just getting back to the point of protest being such a key part of our democratic process. So the working class, female suffrage as well, the suffragettes, women in the UK would still be the property of men, would not be allowed to vote, would not be allowed to work, would not have any financial strength or resources allowed to them, were it not for mass action.
Mass action, absolutely.
Yeah. None of the major constitutional changes that have been for the people of the UK have happened without people taking to the streets.
So I've studied a bit of economics, and one of the concepts in economics is about how companies want to maximize their profit. That's like an underlying assumption
Sure.
in everything, like, you know, utility theory and
Why else
know,
does a business exist if not to make money?
And not even a business. They will take it down to an individual level, and they say a human being, and you can kind of see why, because you need some kind of foundation before you build a theory. But they'll say, if I offered you 3 apples or 5 apples, you couldn't be indifferent between those 2 choices. You would always prefer 5 apples to 3 apples, just because you want to maximize your utility. And it's really interesting, because what you're saying is there's movements out there who actually don't want 5 apples. They don't even want 3. They only need 2. And they're, you know, the rest of it is surplus production, and they're happy to go back into the mix and give it to somebody who doesn't have the option. Maybe somebody else has got an option of 1 apple. So you'll say, I'm getting to the point here. The point is, if you have 5 apples and you get the 6th apple, the additional benefit you get from that additional 1 apple after you've got 5 is less than somebody who you'd be giving one apple to who's got 0 apples.
Always, and if that, I mean, let's actually put that into society.
Go for it.
And transfer it through. So we've got a cost of living crisis going on where a lot of people are struggling to afford apples,
Yeah.
even just one apple for themselves. Now, before the cost of living crisis happened, 30% of adults admitted into hospital were facing malnourishment.
Yeah.
Now, an adult who is facing malnourishment, who is being treated for any other disease whatsoever, will cost 3 times more of the taxpayers' money to be treated
Yeah.
and take 3 times longer. So therefore the beds are being filled up by 3 times longer than what they have to be.
Sure.
And you're actually able to see 3 times less people in the hospital than what you would be in those actual beds. That's before the cost of living crisis. So we're going to see those figures increase,
gosh.
and the cost upon society because of those differences in how you treat somebody with malnourishment
Yeah.
are going to be even greater. However, in the world, we produce enough food to feed 10.7 billion people each and every single year.
More human beings than there are on the planet.
We
Yeah.
only have 7.9 billion, and 1/3 of the global population face insecurity.
Yeah.
So there's actually no need for hunger. What there is a distribution issue or a greed issue or a profit-driven issue.
Profit-driven, yeah, absolutely. We've had a comment in from Mohammed Mancha. He says, it's good that we're able to have a conversation about issues that are impacted by political decisions and the choices that we make. I think that's probably a reference to the fact that we've got this show on. So really, really grateful for that comment, Mancha. And yeah, like I said, we are going to be on
Thank you.
every single week from 6 to 7. Maybe a little bit more about the show itself. So what we're going to do, and I'll give a little bit of background of my interest in politics as well in a little while. But what we're going to do, guys, is every single week we're going to be on for an hour and we're going to be talking about different aspects of politics. So just to give you an idea, the kind of things we are going to be talking about are the Overton window. That's where you sit on the political spectrum, whether you're left wing, right wing, centre right, centre left, whatever. We'll be talking about things like democracy, elections, the monarchy, which is obviously very topical now given the passing of the Queen and the new King Charles. We'll be talking about things like nationalisation, the cost of living crisis, which you mentioned, Alex. I mean, that's a very hot topic right now for all the wrong reasons. The fact that people are genuinely struggling to meet their cost of living and the increasing cost of energy. A topic I'm looking forward to is Brexit and immigration.
Right.
That's going to be a fiery one, and I'd
hope
love
so.
to see. And I'd love to see, I'd love to hear from the listeners, where they stand now. I'd love to hear from people who voted Brexit and have Brexit regret, Brexgret.
What I'd really like to hear from is anybody that voted Brexit and is still standing in that flag with a flag, standing in that camp with a flag flying high.
And trying to understand why.
Please change my mind.
Absolutely. We've got a show on foreign policy, environmental issues, the NHS, housing, which is very important to a lot of people, policing, which I'm sure is going to be an interesting topic, and just generally trust in politics, which I think, given the level of disenfranchisement at the moment, it's probably at an all-time low. And it probably follows on from things like Partygate and Pinchergate and cash for questions and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think the last couple of elections have been showing a downward spiral in disenfranchisement already, haven't they? And we haven't even really seen the data from our, third non-elected change in somebody in governance.
Yeah.
So let's see what happens in the next by-elections, which I think are next April, give or take?
May, yeah.
May, right, yeah. But I think you're right. I mean, in Peterborough, we had less than 30% last time. And I think, or I really hope that's something that this show can hope to try and mitigate a little bit. Re-enfranchise and see people that voting is worthwhile, even if you don't see the purpose of it. The more people that are voting, the more chances we have of holding these people that call themselves leaders to account.
I think so. I think I'm a councillor in a ward where the turnout is between 25 and 30%.
Wow.
And I know for a fact that, I'm not saying this about myself, but there are politicians who operate in wards like that, and they know they don't have to do anything because the voter turnout is so low that the ones that do turn out vote for them
All the time,
regardless, and they don't have to do anything. So absolutely, if you want your politicians or your local representatives to take your ward seriously, you have to come out in force, you have to come out in numbers.
Yep.
And we need to try and get that message out.
Another thing is, of course, is that a lot of these councillors, like yourself, and I'm sure,
please do correct me if you're wrong, if it's not treading on any of your party's toes, Imtiaz, is that you guys have been collecting data about these people over years, absolutely decades, and chances are a lot of these councillors that have been in their position for a very, very long time know exactly who does turn out and vote every single time. They know these 30%.
So canvassing, that's a term used in politics, canvassing.
Yep.
That's when people go, not for your benefit, for the listeners' benefit, people go knocking on doors
Yep.
and talking to people. Canvassing is by definition collecting data, and you want data on who might vote for you and who might not.
And that's something important for other people to realise as well out there, isn't it? Because I think the public have this conception that canvassing is you just merely going out there for their votes, but it's not, is it?
It's not. It's about data. It's about visibility. It's about being able to show the work that you've done, if you've done anything. I've got to read this out. I love this comment. Liz, thank you so much for your interaction, and please continue to do it. But Liz has just said, Liz Bartley that is, says, voting ought to be compulsory.
Wow.
And it is in some countries.
Yeah, I believe Australia charge a $20 fine if you don't take part in the process.
I absolutely love that.
I do as well.
Yeah. Because then not only do you have to get your voters out and hope the others don't, you've actually got to be good.
Yeah.
Because people are going to be forced to make a decision, and they have to actively decide to have you rather than passively have to accept you because they didn't vote.
Correct. And how many times have we heard, oh, well, there's nothing you can do about it. They're in power now for the next 5 years.
Guys, that's the first half of the show done. We're going to go into a break. I wanted to tell you a little bit about me before we go into the break, but Alex has just taken all the airtime, so I'm going to try and be a little bit better when we come back, and then we'll talk about what politics actually means. So do get ready, call in, text in, and we'll speak to you soon.
You're listening to Salam Radio, and it's now time for Isha Azan. This Azan is sponsored by Park Foods. Come and see the difference.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله أشهد أن محمدًا رسول الله حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله
الله أكبر الله أكبر لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم وبارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد اللهم رب هذه الدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة آت محمدا الوسيلة والفضيلة وابعثه مقاما محمودا الذي وعدته اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم بك نحيا وبك نموت وإليك المصير رضينا بالله ربا وبالإسلام دينا وبمحمد صلى الله عليه وسلم نبيا ورسولا.
With you 24 hours a day, 365 days.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Why Politics Matters. I almost said welcome back to Salam Sports, so I've got to be careful with that, guys. You do have a double bill of me, Imtiaz Ali, on a Sunday afternoon now, because I will continue to do the sports show. I have a lot of fun on that, but this genuinely is a topic area where I have a passion, and I'm glad to say I share this passion with a friend of mine, Alex Blower. Alex is on this show with me as well, and he's given us a really good introduction to his background. Really interesting stuff, Alex. And to be honest, like, you know, with the Iraq war, I think that touches a nerve for a lot of people. That's almost like a turning point for a lot of people and their journey through politics. I know many Labour voters, pro-Labour voters, who went off Tony Blair post-2002. And they were massive Blair fans in '97, and even those, and then there was a number who literally lost all interest in politics whatsoever post-Iraq war. So I do think that was a really good point you brought out. On to the second half of the show. So we've outlined the kind of subject areas that we are going to cover over the next 12 weeks. If there's anything that any one of our listeners thinks that we should cover and it hasn't been covered, we'd absolutely pull out another episode and cover that. But what we really want to know is what people think politics is. What are your views on what it actually is? And I was thinking about this just last night, and I was thinking it's difficult to put in a sentence, isn't it? I'm sure you've got a very articulate sentence that you can pull out and say politics is.
I'm not so sure I have.
No,
not something that you could put into a neat little sound bite.
Have you had a conversation with people about what they think it is?
Yeah.
What was the typical response?
The typical response is voting, is the ballot box operation, isn't it? And that is where democracy for a lot of people seems to start and end, if they even take part in that.
So I asked my co-host from Islam Sports just as we leave in the studio,
right,
what's politics to you? And he goes, it's just dirty, isn't it? And that does resonate. That resonates with a lot of people, I think. But yeah, you're saying the actual process of electing people, the ballot box, the campaigning, that's like the front end stuff, isn't it, to getting your representatives?
And even then, when you've got your representative, should it stop then? Again, we mentioned just before the break about how often we hear people saying, oh, well, that's who we've got for the next 4 years, so you might as well get used to it.
Yeah.
And I completely challenge that whole narrative. No, we should not get used to it. These people are your representatives. If you have voted them in and they're not representing you, you should be holding them to account.
Right, so let me just pause you there then.
Yeah.
So we've got an MP in Peterborough, Paul Bristow.
Speaks for the people, apparently.
Northwest, an MP in Northwest Cambs, Shailesh Vara.
Yep.
So there are two local MPs. Let's say, hypothetically, you know, we voted them in 2019, we're now at 2022. Let's say somebody's politically aware, they've looked at their MP's voting records, and their MP is consistently voting against how they would like their MP to vote. What can that person do? They can't do anything.
They might think that, but they will not be alone.
Sometimes.
I mean, you only have to have a look on a Peterborough Evening Telegraph thread where Paul Bristow is mentioned to see the absolute disparity between how people think he represents and how he seems to think he is representing people.
Okay.
Boris Johnson was a perfect example where he apparently carried out a poll of 2,000 and that allowed him to say that Peterborough wanted Boris Johnson back. I'd love to know who those 2,000 people are. I think he's got them off of his campaigning data, canvassing data that we discussed earlier.
And he's got that, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still, come back though. Like, so okay, so I'm very dissatisfied with my local councillor.
Yep.
A guy named Imtiaz Ali represents me. I feel awful about him, and I'm not happy with how he's representing me. What should I do?
Organise with your friends.
Okay.
Find people that think and share your views.
So up your street, your neighbours, whatever.
Yep.
Same
Get on social media. Get in touch with local organisations like the People's Assembly. If they're not campaigning on behalf of you, they will probably be able to signpost you to some people in the local area who do agree with your outlook.
Right.
Organise with them, and when that councillor, when that MP is meeting his constituents, having an open surgery, or when you know he's going to be at his office, you go there and you make some noise. You disrupt his day.
So would you say, I mean, I know what I think, but would you say that you doing what you're doing,
Yep.
collecting people's views, that shared views, bringing them together and actually working against or working in opposition to your elected, that falls within the whole topic of politics?
I would say that that has fundamentally been a part of the democratic process of this country, whether you take it from national level or down to local level.
Yeah.
And now people might question me, hang on a minute, he's just doing his job. What, you're going to go and disrupt him from doing his job? Damn right. His job is to represent you as an electorate.
Yeah.
It's to represent the people. If he is making decisions which do not represent the people, and cannot show that those decisions he's making is representing the people that elected him to the position, then the people who are responsible for electing him to that position should be damn well going and letting him know, yes, disrupt his day, because he is disrupting your right to a democratic process.
So you're talking about your role in the corporate world. You must have interviewed for that role.
Absolutely.
That's similar
Yep.
to canvassing for votes.
Sure.
Then the interview panel must have voted to hire you, just like the electorate vote to hire a councillor or an MP. And then you have regular one-to-ones, don't you?
Appraisals.
Monthly or quarterly one-to-ones, appraisals.
Yes.
And then if you're doing a good job, they'll say, carry on. They'll give you a list of objectives. You fulfill those, you keep earning your money, you keep your job. And if you fail on them, they'll give you a warning. You fail on them again, they'll give you an official warning. You fail on them again, and you're going to be finding your way out the door.
Quite
Why don't we
quickly.
have that in politics? Why don't we have councillors have to present their work every 3 months
Sure.
in a public meeting, and then their constituents come along and say, well, we've had enough of you, we want to change, or you're doing a great job, carry on, or these are the objectives that your constituents want you to deliver on. Why do we not have that formality that we do in the workplace that we love so much?
I think that's an absolutely brilliant question. For me, I believe it's to protect people that get into these positions, to allow them that 4-year term. I mean, personally, and you make a great analogy about having to interview for your job, about having to have appraisals. I would even argue that they should have a 6-month probation period. That yes, you
Like
are,
you do at work. Like you do at work.
yes,
Yeah, yeah.
yes, you're my councillor.
Excellent.
You've been elected in, but guess what? If 10% of your electorate decide after 6 months that you're not doing a good job,
Yeah.
they can pull you back and it goes to by-election
love
again.
that, I love that.
I would even argue for national general elections to be held every 2 to 3 years, not every 5 years.
So, I mean, people get election fatigue as well. We had that in Peterborough when we had the election, then the by-election,
Right.
then the snap general election, and then we had 4 elections in Peterborough, and I think we had 4 elections
In
over
a very
Peterborough.
short time. This was in
Yeah.
the 2019 period you're talking, aren't you? I think?
2018, 2019.
Yeah.
We've had a few comments actually come in. Liz has mentioned again.
Hello again, Liz.
It feels like politics is now controlled by big money.
Agreed.
I'm sure you've got lots to say on that. Faisal's replied, he said, it hasn't always been like that. Fair play. I feel like it's definitely more prevalent now.
Not
So-
always been like...
Not always been like that. It's not always been about
Big money.
Yeah,
Right.
not always been about massive lobbies. Because
And I'd agree.
We kind of follow the American lead there, don't we? Just in terms of how big pharma, big corporate lobbies, operate around the White House.
Well, we would say it's not about big money, and yeah, in some parts I do agree with it, looking back, but obviously I've only got 45 years to call on. But if I was to have a look at how we got to the democratic processes that we've got, and
Yeah.
as I said earlier about the working class males, suffrage of the female, of our women,
Yeah.
it was all about land ownership and gentry before that.
Yeah.
So even then, it was about the money.
We've had our first caller, so I'm going to take this call. Assalamu alaikum. Who's on the line?
Walaikum salam. How are you?
I'm good, Rashid. You are live on Why Politics Matters. You're here with me, Imtiaz Ali and Alex Blower. I would love to know what you think politics is.
What politics is, I mean, in general, I suppose the explanation would be it's how groups of people living together, whether it be, just in a family, whether it be in a village, a town, or a city, or a nation, how do they live together and how do they make decisions together? What's the process of how decisions are made? And
So it's
how
almost like the process of social just operation. I was going to say cohesion, but just social operation, isn't it? So any kind of group of people come together. What's the systems around which they live? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, just not more than about system structure, the culture. How do you actually get things done? Is there, what's the way it's done? What's the manner? Who's allowed to be involved? Who's not allowed to be involved?
Absolutely, and you're quite right. It does sometimes feel that there is a lack of representation and a lack of voices, especially from, in my belief anyway, more marginalised and smaller minorities within the ranks. And I think if I've got you right, your question is really based around how we gel all these different views to find a way of managing society that does cater for everybody in it. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah, I mean that would be part of it. Yeah, because you can trace this back centuries before, and in terms of if we're just talking about democracy, to move away from politics, moving to democracy. You look at how Athenian democracy was. Women weren't allowed. Men who weren't, the elite weren't allowed in. People of ethnic minorities weren't allowed in. There's similar patterns to what some might argue takes place today, but it's all sort of manipulated and hidden and coerced. Particular people are pushed out, into the margins and not allowed to really get involved, and it becomes a struggle for them, and others just turn away because they're disgusted. And
so Alex talked about that a little bit earlier, and he talked about the Iraq War and how that was a major turn-off for him, just in terms of politics and complete disenfranchisement. You were, we're a similar age, me and you, Rashid. So I remember the Iraq War, and you must have gone through that when you were about 22, 23. How was that for you, and how did it change you politically?
Well, yeah, we've known about this for a while, and all of this, and that 2 million man march. I remember going with a group of friends. Some of them you may know. We went as a group, and we did all the things. We wrote to our MPs, we signed petitions, we lobbied, we went to the big demos, and there was 2 million. And it was just, you thought, well, hang on, this is huge, and it just wasn't in the UK. It happened across all of Europe and in America. But it was what it was. It was, it was the deal was signed in blood between Blair and Bush, and they were going to go ahead, no matter what. And they've been proven to be wrong, and millions have died, and the after effects of what's happened in that region continue today. But it is, we have to live with the consequences of it.
Yeah, and Alex said it earlier that they messed up. They did, and I was like, it's not they, it's we. And do you own it as a British citizen? Do you own it that it was us? It was our government. You'd voted for Blair. You'd voted for Blair, right?
It was the government that did. It was the government that did it. We were out there campaigning against it. We were out demonstrating in it.
So you took part in that democratic process to try and hold them to account when you knew the decisions that they were making did not represent you.
Excellent. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I can proudly say I've never voted for Labour under Blair. And that's a fact. And we've had this discussion previously as well, Imtiaz. I never voted for Blair.
Yeah, that's interesting. Not even in 97, or was that before you could vote?
Yeah, not even in 97 I didn't vote for Blair either.
And you make an important point as well, because obviously, yes, you have taken part in that, and maybe you shouldn't really have the ownership that a lot of other people do for the actions that happened at that conflict. But what you do highlight very beautifully is the fact of how broken the system is, and how that lack of representation is rationalised between what we think, what we believe, how we share that with the leaders, and then how they receive it and act upon it.
I completely agree. I think voting should be low from the age of 16 onwards.
Yep.
You bring young people
Good
in.
one, yeah.
The current elites, how they target the grey vote, and they use that to stay in power.
Dusty old white men controlling everything.
I believe the media needs to be regulated in the sense of, like there is in Ireland, that there has been reform, and the media can't be cronying up with the establishment, with certain with the political parties, etc., and then they can't lie and get away with it. They need to be held accountable far better. And we've seen that almost a decade ago.
Yeah.
And those reforms haven't taken place. So those reforms need to take place as well. And those things will have a huge impact, because like we've seen what happened to, unfortunately, Jeremy Corbyn. Now, whether you agree with him or disagree with him, that's fine. But
I'm just going to come out here and say, I'm just going to say, like, Rash, sorry, I'm just to interrupt. I'm just going to say, like, Jeremy Corbyn seems to be living rent free in your and Alex's heads, because he's been mentioned 3 or 4 times in the show already, and Sunak, of course, yeah.
No, my point would be in terms of how things are fixed or manipulated, and people that question how systems and structures are and put forward.
And the punishment they get for daring to do so in such a public place.
So, like, Al Jazeera has done an amazing documentary on
Yes, they have, yeah.
And racism, and no one's speaking about that.
Nowhere, yeah.
The mainstream media in this country won't speak about it.
Well, if they do, they will be forced to hold them to account.
Yeah. No, and when you go and speak about it in radio stations or in any political shows, you bring it up, you're shut down straight away.
Yeah, thank you for calling in, Rashid. And
It's
we'll
been a great show. Quickly get rid of this one, yeah.
No. Look, I mean, there's absolutely good journalistic coverage, particularly with Al Jazeera, and we are going to come on to that. That's definitely going to be one of our later shows.
I think it needs a show on its own, doesn't it?
I think it probably does, and we will fit that in. But just before you go, Rashid, I just want to know why is politics important to you? What is it about politics that you find? Because I know you're interested and you're engaged a lot more than, say, the average layman. What is it about politics that makes it important to you?
Because it impacts all our lives, whether you agree with it or disagree with it. The impact can be quite catastrophic and be quite negative for people across the board. So, for example, in the United States, you have this protection, of the gun lobby, right? And then the politicians support the gun lobby, and then in the NRA, and look at the carnage that causes. Now, if people en masse were to sort of rise up in the United States and force the political representatives and et cetera, and the media and all the rest of it to really, clamp down on this, then you could be saving the lives of millions of people, tens of thousands of people, and you would be running so many lives, and you'd be saving the lives of hundreds of children, kids.
I love it. Yeah. I get it. The fact that I think, Roger, the point you're making is you understand how integral it is in the outcomes of people's lives. Literally every single day is so wide-reaching, wide-ranging, and this is the reason why this interactive show. What is politics to you? What does it mean to you? I feel like people who are not politically educated or involved or active, they tend to feel like politics is just something on the side that doesn't really matter too much, and I think that's a shame. Rashid, thank you so much for calling in. I appreciate that, and inshallah, I hope you continue to listen and enjoy the show.
Thanks very much, buddy.
Thank you.
Cheers now.
A really interesting call.
I agree, and I think it was really interesting to pick up how much accountability matters, and it's not just. We've spoken a lot about the democratic process here, haven't we? And how much weaker, I suppose, is what we've highlighted when accountability isn't there in essence.
Absolutely.
But what Raj really highlighted as well was we also need accountability beyond government. We need it in the way that messages are delivered in the media. The media should not be able to lie. They should not be able to paint false pictures. We rely on them for our information.
So what about, so again, devil's advocate, but
yeah,
I see this, like, the media, sometimes so the England football team plays and they draw 0-0, and I've seen them play and they've been unlucky, they've hit the post and keeper's made a couple of really good saves, and there's nothing wrong with the way they're playing, but the media comes out and they report it and they say England was shocking, they were slow, they were, all this, and it's like an attack.
Yeah.
That's opinions, right?
Yeah, of course.
And we've got no issues with that when it comes to things like sport. Because sport is sport. I
think you'll find that a lot of sports people have, though, haven't they? And when somebody does give you an opinion about a team that you don't agree with, do you bounce back with an alter opinion, or do you pull up data and evidence to challenge that opinion?
Exactly. But the point I'm making is with things like sports coverage, you expect opinions.
Sure.
But one thing I've noticed, and this is especially like when we've gone to the whole 24-hour news cycle, is they've got a limited amount of news and they've got unlimited amount of time to fill.
Yeah.
So they have people on panels and they'll ask people how they feel about things that have happened, rather than in the olden days, 6 o'clock news, you'd switch on and good evening, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. Here's your weather for tomorrow. And it wasn't my view or his view or, get Nigel Farage on.
This
what
is
does he
how
think?
it is.
Exactly. And now it's not news, it's more how we'd like you to feel about it.
Punditing, isn't it? As you said, it's opinionated. And that's all very well if you're asking people that are well informed for their educated opinions.
Yeah.
But obviously when you have, and I hate to say this, but we do have a national reading age in the UK of just 10 years old.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
That's
most of
incredible.
our tabloids do know this. And the reading age in the tabloids is set to meet these figures of their readership.
That's blown my mind. Honestly, that's blown my mind. I did not know that.
Think about what it means about how well-informed people's views can be.
But then it makes sense, doesn't it? Because, the 3-word tagline, build
Always.
back better, what was the other one? Get Brexit done.
Hand, space, face.
Hand, space, yes.
And the Tories love a 3-word.
No, but it makes sense, doesn't it? Just based on what
Sure.
you said. We've had a couple of comments in. Liz again saying it's what the media ignores rather than lying.
Absolutely.
It's
Censorship through omission.
Censorship through omission, exactly. So Liz has said it's manipulation by omission, essentially the same thing. Censorship through omission.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. I think you're both talking about the same thing. But tell me a little bit about that. What is censorship through omission or manipulation by omission?
Censorship through omission is just something I've come up with, I suppose, to describe pretty much exactly what Liz has said, and it is the perspectives that we are given knowledge of. Everything seems to be in this binary fashion. You're either for something, you're against something, but the truth is there's always something else in the middle ground.
Yeah.
And if we go back to actually the conversation that we started off with when I was discussing Marxism and how that is viewed, people are very opinionated about Marxism. Have they read it?
No.
And if you hold an opinion over Marxism,
Yeah.
and you haven't read Marxism, then you do not hold an opinion. What you do is you hold somebody else's opinion on Marxism.
So I listen to a lot of LBC, James O'Brien,
Brilliant guy.
particularly over the Brexit, and the number of callers that were saying we want to make our own rules.
Yeah.
We don't want the EU dictating to us our rules, our country, our rules.
Yeah.
And he was like, which rules? Like, which
Which
rules do you
ones
like?
do you
All
have
of
a
them. No,
problem
but which
with?
one? But all of them. Yeah, but which one? Name one. Which one do you hate the most? Like, name one. And they could not name. So it's easier to hate something without having any knowledge of it than it is to actually pick up a document that says this is what the EU have requested all member states to take part in. And it's so frustrating because these people make decisions and they make decisions with zero information.
And you make a really interesting point about hate. Hate is such a strong word, but I wonder, and please, if there's anybody out there that can give me something that can actually challenge, but is there anything that you truly, 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 deeply and intrinsically understand which you hate?
Wow.
I don't think there is.
That's-
Because once you deeply intrinsically understand something, warts and all,
Yeah.
you understand how it came to be, what its purpose was, maybe it went off the rails.
I might suggest something to you.
Yeah, go on.
Fascism.
Yeah, no, I nearly swore then. Yeah, okay,
So-
you've got me, and it's something I've investigated and understand where it comes
This is
from.
what I'm saying. So
and
I do know
truly,
this.
truly
I
hate
do
it,
know
yeah.
this. I do know this. So,
Yeah.
but that's like that's, and again, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about, because we were talking about, so for the benefit of our listeners, me and Alex, we were talking about how, you could have somebody who would argue for capitalism,
Yeah.
and they're not arguing for capitalism because they want people to die of starvation. They're arguing for capitalism because they want people to work hard and make money. And that's their justification for it. And I'd like to understand that rather than just thinking those people are evil. But with something like fascism, I think when you understand the ideology, it is an ideology built on a lack of understanding that, people are equal. Like everyone's equal.
Sure.
All people are equal.
And maybe as much as I obviously as an ideology, I do absolutely hate it.
Yeah.
I don't even feel the word hate is strong enough there. But I do understand how it has taken hold.
Yeah.
And we are very close to it in the UK. I mean, when we've got that, going back to it again, the reading age of 10, when we've got an angry populace that is looking for enemies and they're not seeking them in the people that have the actual power to make the changes they need,
Yeah.
we're getting dangerously close to that precipice of fascism.
When people are desperate, when people are not happy in the lives that they're living,
Yeah.
they are looking for scapegoats. They are looking for targets.
Yes.
And that lends itself to moving over towards a fascist state.
I think we've seen it with the rising of the hostile environment again of late, and we had an attack on an immigration place just last week, didn't we? A place that's meant to be a sanctitude of safety for people
was it
seeking
Manston?
refuge.
Is it Manston?
I
Yeah,
think it was, yeah.
So there was a recently, and we're going to do this more in future shows, just like current affairs and what's going on. But Manston, which is a migrants
Processing place
facility
for people that have arrived on boats.
incredibly overpopulated, nowhere near enough space for those
3
to-
times overpopulated with people sleeping on floors.
and that was the victim of a firebomb attack, a Molotov cocktail attack from a person who was following right-wing ideology, essentially. So yeah, we'll talk about that. Listen, we're out of time. Just
Already?
before we go, I am going to read out the last couple of messages from Liz. Liz, thank you so much for interacting with the show. We genuinely appreciate it. Liz says the EU rules were brilliant for workers. Weekends and holiday pay, working hours, all those kinds of things. They're not the rules that you obviously. And then Liz also said she hates racism. So you're definitely on our side of that argument there, Liz. Thank you so much for interacting. Alex,
Thanks
it's
very
been an
much.
absolute pleasure. Which show are you looking to most over the next 10, 12 weeks? What topic?
There's one where we're going to be having a look at left versus right, where we explore.
That's next week.
Is it?
Yeah.
Then probably that one, and I think that's really going to change people's views on a lot of things.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's been a really good first show. Thank you so much again to everyone who's interacted. Like I said, we will be back again next week, 6 to 7, where we're going to be talking about left versus right or centre. So